African Airways says it will be using incoming capital to boost its subsidiaries. The national carrier will transfer 2.7 billion rand to its subsidiaries in order to help them boost their financial position. As the airline emerges from the business rescue process, the Department of Public Enterprises yesterday told Parliament that the success of SAA's business rescue plan depended on the financial and operational health of its subsidiaries. To talk more about this is aviation expert Desmond Latham. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. Mr. Latham, SAA subsidiaries get 2.7 billion rand funding, lifeline, but is this in addition to the allocation of 10.5 billion rand bailout to cover SAA's business rescue process?
No, it's part of the 10.5. They're halving off 2.7 billion to cope with SAA Technical. I think 1.6 billion of that goes to SAA Technical, which is struggling at the moment, and about 820 million to Mango, and 218 million to Airship. So those are the three subsidiaries you're talking about. So it's a portion, you know, it's a 20%, 27% portion of the amount of the 10.7. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll look deeper in that in just a moment, but just looking at the business rescue, SAA is supposed to exit this after filing implementation plan with the CIPC. Has it helped lift it from financial distress, given that COVID-19 has already, imposed restrictions on international and domestic travel, also impacting on the subsidiaries' operations?
No. I mean, an airline makes money when it flies. When it doesn't fly, it makes no money. And SAA is not flying. So I think you've got to start from there and say, okay, after this period, what kind of miracle is going to allow SAA to fly to certain locations when we are locked down? And if you look at the latest figures and the COVID expanse that we've all seen here, the risk analysis being done by aviation companies worldwide is that domestically, some parts of the world, there's a recovery. But international airlines are suffering. And many of them are being bailed out by their governments in some cases, or by the investors in others. But no, the short answer is that SAA faces the problem here that unless the majority of our people are somehow, and miraculously I must say again, vaccinated in the next 6 months, they're not going to be flying in 6 months, because this the next wave is going to take at least a few months to work through our population.
Does this mean that there could be an extension of the business rescue?
No, by law, they may not do that. So at this point, they will have to change the corporate law. But the reality here is that the creditors have allowed this to happen because they've owed so much money. So in the meantime, the taxpayer, by way of government, is bailing out this airline when it cannot fly. So for us in the industry looking at this, you know, airlines are flying around us all the time. United Airlines of the USA announced $780 return flights from Newark, South Africa, starting in July. And, that's one of the main routes that SAA made money out of. And already it's gone. So I don't see how anyone looking at this in a kind of dispassionate way and not using anything else as a kind of motivation would think that there's good news for SAA coming in the near future. I mean, this airline is facing a very, very concerted effort from other airlines in our region and in Africa generally, who have basically eaten its lunch in the last few months. Airlink, for example, announced they're flying to Uganda next month. I mean, Entebbe Airport to OR Tambo. And that's one of the, the pretty viable routes because of the economies of East African and Southern African marketplaces. So those business people who want to fly and those who are allowed to fly will be using these airlines now, and they are making some money. So I don't see how the airline can make these statements about coming out of business rescue when it's not flying and its routes have been stolen.
So this extension to its subsidiaries, how is it going to help? As I've mentioned earlier on, they've also suffered as a result of COVID-19. So how is this going to help?
That's a great question. I mean, we're looking at thousands of people's working lives. So this is not a small thing. But in the midst of this COVID, we've had escalation of unemployment. Youth unemployment is 47%. And now we are trying to bail out a few thousand workers at a place where it makes no money. So you can see that if you're doing risk analysis and if you're doing an MBA program, for example, and looking at this, you'd start squinting somewhat at the numbers, particularly because the numbers are not coming in. There's no revenue accruing for this airline. The only revenue, so-called revenue, is cash bailouts coming from the taxpayer or some kind of other funders. We're told that by August we'll hear about an investor of some sort And for the first time, SAA's owners, the shareholder, which is government, is saying that it's going to consider reducing its shareholding on the airlines. And so these are vagaries and are in the midst of certainties. Certainties are you take off, you land, someone pays for the flight. You pay for fuel, which is a big cost, 70%. On you go. It's a business. There's no business here.
As you say, a lot of it has gone to restructuring, right-sizing, paying of staff. Now, SAA has made an appointment of a new interim CEO. This is the third. Thomas Khokolo becomes the third CEO since the board and government placed the airline under voluntary business rescue process in December of 2019. How should we read into this? As you mentioned, the problems that exist at the moment, can he infuse it with a new way of thinking, a new plan?
Again, a brilliant question. People have been arguing about this for the last couple of years. I mean, there is a place for state-owned airlines. Ethiopian Airlines is an example. Ethiopian Airlines made profits of $250 million up until COVID at the last quarter. It was making cash. It was going to build a $2 billion new airport in Ethiopia, for example. But the secret they had there is that the government owned it, but it didn't interfere. What's happened at SAA is that government has interfered. And no investor in their right mind wants to invest in an airline that's not fixing itself. The same shareholders are sitting there waving their fingers around, Public Works and so on, saying this is what you must do, this is what you mustn't do. They have political pressures growing on them as shareholders. And if they don't butt out of the equation, no investor in the future is going to pour loads of money into this airline unless the shareholder gets 51%. And that's not likely.
Thank you so much for your time. Desmond Latham is an aviation expert, and we continue with other business and financial news.